Thanks, Troy. So this is actually a topic that comes up as requested pretty frequently. So, when we talk about xMatters being used in IT, it tends to be 4 general areas. It tends to be major incident management, IT operations, IT automation, and service management. And within the service management umbrella, one of the most popular integrations that we have out there is ServiceNow. People are always asking, what do customers do with ServiceNow and xMatters together, and why? So thank you both for joining us for the panel today. I'm a consumer of both of your services pretty regularly. I've got kind of a strange OCD hand washing thing, so thank you for that. And the very first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is hit the Siri button on my phone and say, what's the weather like outside today? And since I moved to California, it's always the same, especially in the Bay Area. It doesn't rain, it's sunny. The only thing is, am I going to melt in the heat, or will I need a light jacket? That's pretty much the only thing that happens. So thank you both for all your services that I consume every single day. We have a whole host of different questions that people ask. What I tried to do is distill them down to kind of the core areas. I thought for those of you for the folks who aren't as familiar with your organizations and of course your roles, although I know you were both having a lot of conversations last night with people, but maybe as part of the first question, which I'd like to ask you a little bit about the history of service management in your organization, what you had in the past and how you wound up at ServiceNow. But before you get there, it'd be great if you could do an introduction to yourselves as part of that question as well.
Sure.
Josie?
Sure. So I'm Josie Lange with Ecolab. I'm an IT operations manager there. Ecolab is really a global leader in water, energy, and hygiene technologies and services, working with food industries and hospitality, healthcare, different markets like that. Essentially, we work to make the world a cleaner, healthier, and safer place. My role within the organization, I essentially manage what's like a NOC. So it's our monitoring and escalation center. We facilitate any IT incidents that would either stop production or seriously impact it.
Michael?
Good morning. Michael Belfoure. I'm the Director of IT Operations at the Weather Channel. I'm sure most of you have heard of the Weather Channel. We went live on air. It launched in 1982 as a cable TV provider. So we've made a slow transition rapidly over the last few years from a cable television station more to a data company and a product and technology company. And so it used to be we were a TV station that provided data, and now we're a product and technology data corporation that has a TV station. So I run the Technology Operations Center. It's much like Josie. We are the tier 1 support for all things Weather Channel, internal help desk, as well as all of our broadcast systems, our digital properties, weather.com. We have a quite sophisticated operations center where we're monitoring weather.com, we're monitoring our APIs, our apps, and also the broadcast feeds just 24/7.
That's awesome. When we talked yesterday during the roadmap session, AB from New Relic was talking about how all companies are becoming, software companies. The Weather Channel is actually a great example of that. I mean, if you'd asked 10 years ago what the Weather Channel's business is going to look like 10 years in the future, you would not have said that the majority of the things that they provide are a data service. But today, literally the Weather Channel is on my watch, right? That's where I get the information that comes in, and that would have been entirely unpredictable, and that's an amazing transformation for you guys.
Absolutely.
So actually, continuing on with your role, tell us a little bit about how you wound up at ServiceNow. What were the things that were part of your service management portfolio before? When did you make that transition, and what are the driving factors behind it?
So it's kind of interesting. I've been with the Weather Channel now for 2 years, and when I came into the company, they were just transitioning from another platform to RemedyForce. And then we were going along the roads of RemedyForce, and then we realized we needed a notification system, and I was a previous xMatters customer, so I suggested xMatters, and we looked at that, and we were going to integrate it into RemedyForce. And then we got a word from our corporate technology solutions team that they wanted to bring ServiceNow in for other than service management capabilities. So we jumped on that bandwagon. We ran to the bandwagon before that. So, and I'd used ServiceNow previously and realized it's an excellent platform. Right. So we've made quite the transition. It's like 3 tools in 2 years.
Wow, so basically you've had ServiceNow then for
Since May 31st, we went live.
Wow, that's awesome. So you guys have some recent war stories that I'm sure I'll ask about a little bit later as well. Josie, how about you? What was your service management story?
Yeah, so in about the end of 2011, Ecolab had acquired Nelco, and then shortly after that we acquired Champion. And literally pretty much overnight we doubled in size as a company, and along with that came 3 ticketing systems. So Ecolab was using Remedy, Nelco was using HP Service Desk, and Champion was using Trackit, and we really needed to come up with a platform that we could use to really integrate and unite IT. And so we had gotten ServiceNow.
Cool.
And I think we got it shortly after that acquisition and then rolled it out within the next year.
And then, so with ServiceNow, because you were merging 3 organizations, was there a lot of history of the IT organization using cloud platforms, or was ServiceNow the very first one?
We had some applications that we were already using in the cloud, but I think ServiceNow was really that first one that really leaped us into that arena. It was the first time we really utilized like the identity management and single sign-on, and it was the first one that was that widely used. It was used across the entire organization. So all 40,000 plus 47,000 people were using ServiceNow. So that really kind of launched us into the cloud-based applications.
Cool. And why you, Michael? Was ServiceNow the first? Obviously, you were looking at Remedyforce already, so you had already kind of decided.
Right, we were in Remedyforce, yeah.
Okay.
So at the Weather Channel, we have a quite unique organization. Especially our CIO is he's on the cutting edge of a lot of things. Everything we do is in the cloud. We do have data centers, and a lot of weather.com is still on-prem. But our API platform that we do serve 15 billion API calls a day to that platform is in the Amazon cloud. And we will not look at any solution that is on-prem. Everything has to be cloud-based.
That's cool. And what are the driving factors behind that? So is that basically what's core, we keep to us, everything else we just do in the cloud? What are the driving, if you were to kind of think of like the top reasons why your organization really is cloud first?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with reducing footprint in the data centers and the cost to run a data center, and the obsolescence of equipment, and just generally around cost, and more emerging technologies are in the cloud. So.
Right. What about you, Josie? What's kind of like, if you were to think about like, why cloud, right? Why not just say, hey, if all the choices we have, Remedy something we're very happy with, but let's stick with our premises approach over time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's very similar to what Michael was saying. Is that, what do you want your core competency to be? Is that what we want to be managing? I think we really wanted to say, we're going to manage the service, not all the footprint, the technology, making sure the servers and keeping them up to date and everything. Also, we're starting to explore the bring your own device or choose your own device, and just the cloud strategy seems to fit the direction that we're going, giving us a good base for that.
That's a very common trend. I think a lot of the folks who are in the room probably had the same discussions when they're going through deciding, do we really want to be getting the value out of the service desk platform, or do we want to run it, right? Like, where's the value for it in the organization? And speaking of kind of other systems, what's the ecosystem around your ServiceNow platform look like? So obviously you're xMatters user, so that's one of the things that attach to it. But what are the other things that feed into it or out of your service management platform?
So we use a whole suite of monitoring tools, but we do have that single pane of glass that is integrated into ServiceNow. So we use CASOI, SOI, and we have two-way integration with that. So kind of the path it follows in my department, we have our monitoring tools in that single pane of glass. We have semi-auto and automated ticketing that happens from those monitoring tools into ServiceNow, and then the integration with xMatters, if any of those tickets are high or critical, automatically trigger xMatters. So.
Cool. And what about you, Michael?
So in ServiceNow, basically we've been on it since May 31st, and we have incident change, asset configuration, and problem management in the ServiceNow tool, and we have request management coming. And our integrations have been primarily with xMatters. The only other integrations we have at this point are the data that actually feeds xMatters, or I'm sorry, ServiceNow. But one of the things, especially that we've been looking at recently, is we do so much monitoring, and when listening to a gentleman earlier from Kroger about how the alerts come from the freezers and they go right into ServiceNow and then xMatters. I think they're going to xMatters now, but how they feed through they want them to feed through ServiceNow and xMatters to alert. That's something that we want to go toward, but we have to find a solution to reduce the false negatives so we're not creating 10,000 tickets a week just off of automated monitoring.
That's partly why we have the semi-auto.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a common theme we see where you have ServiceNow kind of acting as the things that are truly service impacting, right? That impact your either operation or our problems that need dealing with. And everything else kind of, as much as you can, you automate into that system and then communicating back out. But there always tends to be the stuff that's like, is this a problem? I don't really know, right? Is this a real incident that's taking place? So you need like a person evaluation thing. And it's some of the stuff that Ian was talking about yesterday in the roadmap stuff was exactly those things, right?
Yeah.
Which is using kind of xMatters as one of the tools in your toolkit to route in the semi-automated scenario. There's some interesting stuff that actually we didn't have time to schedule it today, but kind of talking about a no-ops sort of model where you have the decisions being made without an operations center. So topic for next year, maybe.
I don't want to hear that.
Well, it's actually a really cool model because it focuses people on the fun stuff, right? So you focus on the triage and not the evaluation of stuff looking at a screen. So you replace eyes on glass with intelligent routing instead. But obviously the people, you have a lot more cool stuff to do. In terms of looking at the process, you mentioned you have a whole host of processes that you've already tied into ServiceNow today. What are the ones that are actually going out on the xMatters side? Incidents, certainly. But are there any others, like changes or anything like that you route through xMatters as well?
At this time, we are that we route from ServiceNow to xMatters. It's incident assignment notifications, and then small notifications notifying people in the company that there are issues with a certain high-profile P1, P2 issue.
Right. And then obviously there's a whole host of capabilities within the ServiceNow platform as well as the other toolkits that you have. For folks who are obviously existing clients, they kind of know what xMatters is, but there's people in the room who actually are in the process of looking at solutions, including xMatters. If you're to look at like the top 3 reasons as an example, you have to be 3, we'll pick 3 as the number to start with. But what are the reasons that you look at, say, of all the other things that you have in your toolkit, what are the things that you needed that you chose xMatters to provide as a service to?
Well, the main reason that we looked at xMatters, we needed a notification platform that could get out thousands of emails in a short amount of time. And the system that we were on, if we sent distribution list of 1,500 people, the service that was provided for us or that we paid for, it would take up to 45 minutes for them to get the notifications out of their system. So we've already there's an incident, by time it's resolved before they even get the notification. So, and that kind of perturbed our executive leadership team a little bit. So we had to start looking for something. But the other thing is, I had previously worked with xMatters and I knew the tool, and it's really you really have a narrow market because there's not a lot of tools out there that do what xMatters does. And we needed that flexibility. The templating is just invaluable to us. I can't tell you how many times that when we were manually doing notifications that we would have a broadcast issue, and one of my agents would, it could be 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's sending out instead of sending it to the broadcast leadership team, he's sending the DL to the digital team. And so nobody knows about it. And we would get dinged on those kind of things. So we wanted something to ensure that we could have a template. If it's a broadcast issue, it already has the DL in there.
Right. Cool. What about you, Josie? What were the things that drove you to the xMatters platform?
3 things. Definitely, one of the challenges we had when we grew in size, our support on-call schedules were super complicated. We went to a follow the sun model and we had multi-tier teams. We were managing it all via spreadsheet. And there was a lot of kind of watching the clock. So you'd call someone, leave a message, watch the clock, wait 15 minutes. Did they call back? Okay, I gotta call them again. So our staff was spending a lot of time on what I would say isn't really a value add. instead of doing that intelligent routing and kind of that triage work, they were watching the phone. So that was huge for us. The other aspect and what really hit home for us was the communications to the stakeholders. We didn't have a good solution for that. So we were communicating out outages, but it was kind of an all or nothing thing. So either there was people that got everything, whether or not it was relevant to them or not, and then there was people that should be getting communications that weren't, and they just weren't timely. So we needed that too, and then really that conference bridging for when there's kind of that war room scenario. We needed something to speed that up as well.
Right. Actually, speaking of that, I think that there's, I think you mentioned there's a couple of different things you guys do outside of the ServiceNow piece with xMatters as well. The war room kind of being an example of that.
Right.
Are there other things that you do outside of the ServiceNow things with xMatters?
Right now, the only thing that's being done through xMatters with ServiceNow is the incident escalation. We're hoping to further leverage for the business communications. So those are done solely out of xMatters. We're kind of evolving that process, so we're getting ready to launch like subscriptions, which we're excited about. But we're hoping in the future to take advantage of some of the things that are within ServiceNow, like configuration items, to even get them out faster. Like we've detected a problem with this type of application and get it out to the right people. But yeah, the conference bridges and the business communications are strictly done outside of ServiceNow right now.
Cool. Bye, Michael.
So we probably use xMatters more outside of ServiceNow than we do integrated with ServiceNow at this point. One of the challenges that we had, like I said, was drafting notifications, getting them out. But we have a growing list of customers from our B2B and B2C side that we are tied to SLAs that we have to get notifications out to them. If we see an incident that impacts them, we have to get it out to them within 15 minutes. And then we have to follow up every 30 minutes after that. We have to get my TOC team gets a status update from the engineers working on the issue, or they're on a bridge with them, and then they send out the notification. So we send a lot of internal and external notifications with xMatters.
And these SLAs aren't what people might think of when they think of the Weather Channel. These aren't SLAs tied to what's happening on the Weather Channel on TV, right? These are really tied to the Weather Channel as a software company SLAs.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There's, and you know, we want to be able to find that before our customer does and they call us, but we'll tell them you may be impacted by stale data because we have one of our upstream systems that wasn't feeding updated data to the forecasting platform.
Right. Very cool. One of the questions that always comes up when we're talking about actually deploying xMatters into a ServiceNow customer's environment, and that's along the issues of data management. So, you know, there's always a question of where does a piece of data actually live? Where is it mastered? Who owns it? So, you know, this is kind of an interesting scenario. Everyone always has slightly different takes. So I'm curious if you'd like to share your take on things like people information. Where does someone's phone number or email address, where's that mastered? Things like group structures, team rules, and escalation rules, schedules. There's ways you can have that live all over the place, and you can federate the data together. Typically, you tend to go for a mastered model. So I'm curious as to, Josie, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Sure.
What is kind of your data strategy with xMatters and ServiceNow as far as the information that's shared between the systems?
Good question, and we've changed it. So we kind of learned when we initially rolled out xMatters, we did it one way, and we're actually reconfiguring it, or we reconfigured it. So for ServiceNow, because of our complex environment, kind of looking back at, we have 3 of things. We actually have 3 Active Directory domains, one for each legacy company. So we have an identity management system, and then those 3 Active Directory domains feed into ServiceNow. So we used that data as our master for things like the phone numbers and the user information. The group schedules, though, themselves, and kind of the escalation patterns, that's all housed strictly in xMatters. And one of the things that we found, we did have it set up where it was regularly syncing from ServiceNow into xMatters, and we found that it was very difficult to communicate back to our user population where they needed to change their information when they wanted to update it. So we shifted from having that regular sync back to like a seed model where it pulled it in once,
right.
But then if they wanted to make changes, they just did it in xMatters.
Right.
So.
This issue was very difficult for us because we didn't have a single source of information for all employee data. And We, of course, being that the Weather Channel likes everything in the cloud, we're not a typical company to where we don't have Microsoft Office, we don't have Outlook. We use Google Mail, we use Google Docs.
Right.
The distribution lists are in Google Groups. So feeding all that information into xMatters was a challenge. Plus, our employees and our contractors are kept in separate systems as well. So our corporate technology solutions team, they acquired a product called Cloud Pages. And so they feed all of the upstream systems into a database, and that's the master record of all employee data. And then that feeds Cloud Pages feeds ServiceNow, ServiceNow feeds xMatters. So, but Cloud Pages is a system of record if people need to enter their mobile number, because we don't put that in there. We don't put home numbers. You have your email address and your work phone number, and you can put any profile information. So Cloud Pages actually feeds that. It'll go downstream to ServiceNow and xMatters, and then it'll also push it back upstream to the other systems.
What about things like scheduling information and stuff? I know you guys still are getting started on that. But
We are right now, we're starting to test putting in schedules, support team schedules, and assigning tickets, going out, looking up who's on call, because we always have somebody on call.
Right.
We're a 24/7 organization. The place is never closed.
Not the weather goes to sleep late at night.
Yeah, you know, sometimes I can't go to sleep at night. Oh, sorry, because there's an issue with the weather, but yeah.
Cool. So I'm curious about, so since you guys, and I guess Josie may have a little bit more detail on this because her implementation is slightly more mature, but what was things like in your life with the service management pre-xMatters versus post-Matters? And the more specific can be, the better. So things like, did it take you, have you shortened your time to engage people by like 50%? What are the types of changes that you've seen that you can go back and measure and say, here's how it's better? Another one that comes up pretty frequently is things like, we just don't send out as many communications, right? We've actually reduced the noise, all that kind of stuff.
Right. So we haven't made it as far with the communications, but definitely just around our incident management, we've seen huge improvements. And it's ever evolving, because the more you streamline and automate, the more time you have to improve the services and whatnot. So we've definitely seen reductions in time to respond from teams. They actually can see where they're failing and what they need to do to improve. So that's been huge, as well as like time to respond. The way our team is structured, my NOC team essentially gets those alerts and has to create the tickets.
Right.
But what we've seen, because that they're not having to spend the time calling and watching the phone and things like that, they can spend more of that time actually doing the triage work and getting it to the right team more quickly. And we've seen, just even with them alone, that they've reduced the time to get those tickets and those incidents going by 50%. Right. So that's been huge for us. Just the quality of what they can do. We don't have to have as many bridges, because they can spend more time doing that intelligent routing.
Right. Right. So it sounds like for you guys, it's really more about having the accountability and the transparency, knowing what's actually happening, where before it was kind of like, well,
yeah, and automating those things that, I don't want to say, you don't need people to add the value there. They're kind of no value add, having them watch the phone. So allows them to do things that were more intelligent.
Yeah. Well, I started my career working in like NOC, so I can totally appreciate that. Being the person who has to follow up with people on the phone is not the fun part of the job.
No.
The fun part of the job is actually digging into the hairy technical problems. That's why you get it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And Mike, for you guys, a lot of it was tied around the SLAs, right? Really going through and actually having better visibility. So what's kind of been the impact to you guys?
Right. So, and I wish we would have some measurements around it, because it would probably be well over 50% at the time to get notifications out. And the important thing is that they're sent out correctly. And they're going to the right people, and we have visibility into who's received the message as well. We have reporting on those kinds of things using xMatters. But yeah, it's really the speed and accuracy of getting messages out the door.
Very cool. Now I know that there's a lot of questions that people ask about major incidents in particular, and we had an interesting discussion yesterday over. I think it may have been the second or third drink, so it was relatively early where I do remember a little bit about it. But I think we're talking about how you guys actually have a pretty good process in place to try to minimize what we talked about very frequently is major incidents. So you want to talk a little bit about what you guys do with that and how it factors into the ServiceNow and xMatters integrations?
Yeah, so as far as like our major incidents, or in ServiceNow we call them criticals, we have about like 15 to 30 that we facilitate the resolution on a month. And whereas a lot of people kind of kick off bridges as soon as they determine that it's a major incident, we actually don't have to do that very often. So kind of the process that we use is between our monitoring tools and our NOC team, documentation and just fault isolation, we can really figure out who needs to do that ticket, and we just use xMatters to automate it and get it routed out. Now, the only time we get to that conference bridging scenario, which honestly only happens maybe 5-6 times a year, we get to that scenario when there's no clear path to resolution. So really, they have no clue. But it's a pretty rare occurrence. For us, it always starts out as an incident, though. It's always tracked in ServiceNow to begin with.
So that was totally a setup question, by the way. So I know a common question I get asked all the time is, how do you actually minimize the number of major incidents you have? So now, when you're looking for an answer for that question, really you gotta grab Josie before she leaves the room, because she's got like the secret figured out. They've got a really mature service model. They've got great diagnostic information, documentation that actually makes it so that they've used the information over time to actually drive down the number of major incidents. So what used to be a major incident now is just like a regular day-to-day sort of thing, right?
Completely.
So naturally, that's a great process improvement path to take that Ecolab's done a great job of actually bringing to life. Michael, what about your view on major incidents?
Well, at the Weather Channel, data is king there, and so really data can grow stale very fast. So what was current right now, 5 minutes from now 20 minutes is really the mark, is an issue. So if the data is not updated. So I wish we had 5 incidents a year. It's more of, five bridges.
Five bridges,
Five
maybe.
bridges. So it's more like 5 a week. And but we have, one of the things that's really helped us cut down our major incidents is strengthening our change management system. Over the last 2 years, we really worked on that. And when I started the Weather Channel, it was a very cool company, but I ran the only 24/7 organization. And the first 2 weeks I was there, I was probably woken up 3 times a week at 3 in the morning, and it all came back to somebody not making a proper change and letting people know that what was going on. But we have our TOC agents, they have to multitask a lot when, like in the middle of the night, we only have 2 agents on. So if there's a major incident, they have to coordinate. They have to identify the issue when they see the monitoring. They have to get a hold of the people, and they use xMatters to do that. They page out to those people, get them on a bridge, calling into the TOC, but then they also have to get the notification out for either the customers, or they have to get it out to our management team, and then they have to facilitate the bridge as well. So xMatters has really helped them, because the part to draft the message, get it out, page the person, has become so much easier for them that they have time to do all the other stuff.
Cool. So I know that I want to be cognizant of time, because I want to make sure we're kind of stay on schedule a little bit. But do you have any parting thoughts, suggestions, advice you give to folks who are at the same point in your xMatters and ServiceNow journey that you are today? What would be the words of advice you'd give to 6 months ago, Michael, if you would? That might be useful for the rest of the group as well.
I think one of the things that is to keep systems in the cloud, leverage every aspect of xMatters that you can. Coming to this conference has really opened my eyes to some of the things that xMatters does that we haven't taken advantage of, and I've actually seen use cases to where they would benefit us and help us reduce time to resolution.
Cool. Josie?
Yeah, as far as xMatters, I'd probably say really spend some time talking to folks here. There's wonderful ideas. I know the last time we came for the conference, we were just getting the product and getting ready to launch it. So folks
now you're on stage. You're not an expert.
Yeah, I know. Well, and we took a lot of the advice from what people had been saying and applied that when we were doing our implementation. But really just around incident management and whatnot, it's an ever-evolving process. I've been with my little knock in one shape or another for 8 years now. So kind of that progression, it happens over time, and really rely on those processes like incident management, change management, problem management to keep feeding improvement into that process that you own. So.
Cool. Very cool. So I want to leave us some time to have some questions from the audience as well. So if we have, it's kind of hard to see with the lights, but I think there's a couple of mics that are out there. If there's any questions, why don't we take a few from the audience?
Hi, Brent Cooper from Marathon Oil. I was wondering about the CMDBs in your ServiceNow instances, where you are in the kind of maturity model on their CMDB, if you're business service aware in your CMDB, et cetera.
So a CMDB question as far as where you guys are in terms of having your CMDB going. And this is, I know it's a little bit of a 4-letter word. So Josie, you want to take a little bit of a shot at the CMDB status, or where you guys keep the service models that allow you to drive the value?
Sadly, like CMDB has always been something that's been challenging, and I think like when IT organizations look at like where do we put our funding and our resources, incident management's usually like high on the list, problem management maybe doesn't get as much. So we're just really starting to delve into the CMDB side of things. We're working with an application called Service Watch, and then we have some other utilities that pull some things through. In the absence of that, we do a lot of documentation and knowledge base articles that we use for our triage in the interim. The monitoring tools help a lot too. So
it sounds like you guys have kind of filled the function of the CMDB with very rich documentation on what exists out there, and it's updated with the services as you roll them out as well.
Absolutely.
So we were going down the path of the CMDB last year before we realized we were going to go to ServiceNow in Remedyforce, and we were making great strides. We had all of our data centers. We had discovery of all the assets in them. They were reviewed, and we were getting ready to populate the CMDB. And then the word came down, we're going to ServiceNow, and we're like, okay, well, let's not waste the time in Remedyforce. And so right now, when we went live May 31st, like I said, and they already had most of the data to populate the CMDB. So they've been working on that since June, and we're just now getting ready that it's populated enough to where we can start tying those CIs into change records and incidents and actually using the CMDB.
Very cool. Any other questions? I see one in the back of the room and one in the front. Oh, it's like two extremes. Who's going to make it all the way through?
I'll start at the back here. So I've heard a lot this week about using your product in a reactionary basis. I'm looking at something a little bit forward, so integrating with Splunk, obviously using predictive on the Splunk side. Any of you guys got experience in that domain?
Sorry, was the question around using xMatters more proactively versus reactively?
With Splunk.
In the SOC?
Splunk.
Oh, it's Splunk, sorry.
Yeah.
It was a long night, sorry. So do you guys any... That's going to be my excuse for a lot of things today. It is hard to hear.
So we're kind of doing one of these when you're talking.
Do you guys use Splunk at all, or use anything with Splunk and xMatters?
No. So, although I heard somebody else, I got their card. So there are people here who do. So
in general, just because I have a lot of conversation with a lot of our clients, with Splunk, typically the pathway is you want to catch something before it becomes service impacting in an incident. So when we talk a little bit about, I mentioned at the very start about different pathways into xMatters from IT tools, IT operations and service assurance tools like Splunk and other analytic systems, those can feed into xMatters for someone to say, hey, something looks a little off here, right? And that can be the initial, a NOC group can do the triage, any of the subject matter experts can, and from that pathway, the examples that Ian was showing yesterday as part of the roadmap, the responses there can drive activity into ServiceNow and other systems. So you really have kind of a person in the middle evaluating the scenario, but the communication can drive the cross-system integration there.
Hey, Michael, this is Larry. Did I understand you to say that you actually you're abandoning the CMDB in Remedy and moving to the ServiceNow, or are you keeping your CMDB and all your CIs there?
No, we use the, and I cannot think of it for the life of me, the BMC tool. We were using the BMC, the discovery tool.
Title? Tatum?
I know you use it at Fiserv. And so what we did is we used that product to discover our all of our data centers. And then, and actually ServiceNow, when we told them we were using that tool, they were pretty excited about it because they said it'll integrate into ServiceNow. And we're kind of transitioning away from that into other discovery tools. But we never actually populated the Remedy Force database, which is not Atrium. And, but I know that you're a big Remedy user and you're going to have to go with the transition from that CMDB over to ServiceNow.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's take one more question if we have it. Audience, it's kind of hard to see. Maybe? All right, looks like we took down all the questions. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Since we're talking about CMDB, have you started orienting your infrastructure CIs up to service lines and how their interdependencies and application data impacts your customers?
We have. They did about a 4 or 5 month exercise the end of last year, the beginning of this year, to do service mapping and system mapping upstream and downstream. And the challenge for us now is we have a highly changing infrastructure, is to keep those up to date, and that's where CMDB librarian comes in.
So then are you going to orient your incident management process against the tiering structure of those service lines?
Absolutely, because we want to be able to not only see which CI failed, we want to be able to track services, and we eventually want to put a cost model around each of those services to support them.
Just how do you guys deal with service model on your side? It's primarily through documentation, sounds like, right?
Documentation, but we're really making advancements. We're getting some different tools to do that service mapping. Our monitoring tools are going in that direction as well. So, I mean, it's a stopgap for now. It is. It's always hard to get things mapped out and then keep them up to date. So it's pretty easy to get the devices listed out, but how they all feed into that service and that application is where it becomes a little more difficult. But I think we're getting some different tools that we can leverage that will speed things along.
Cool. All right, well, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us on the panel today. I think it's very interesting, and I suspect that you'll get a lot of questions before you make it down the end of the room for some one-on-one discussions. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
us.